My son and his wife plotted my funeral in whispers outside my hospital curtain. They tried to kill me with poisoned whiskey and secretly tagged every piece of my home with estate sale stickers. Instead of drinking it, I saved it. And soon, I walked into their family dinner, placed it on the table, and watched as every guilty face turned pale at once. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Edmund Calder, though most folks call me Ned. 72, widower, grandfather. I have spent my life with a hammer in one hand and a carpenter's pencil tucked behind my ear, steady as a heartbeat. For 40 years I straightened lines that wanted to wander and coaxed doors to close without a shudder. A true joint and a level bubble, that was my grammar. Neighbors called me dependable. I never aimed higher than that. Dependable can hold up a house. I still live in the place Marion and I built when our hands were young and our backs forgave us. She picked the red for the front door, a lighthouse for coming home, she said. 10 winters gone, and still I polish that door every spring until it glows like an ember. When I touch it, I can almost feel her palm pressing back. Some things outlast breath. Our son, Daniel, learned to scrape his knees on these floors and to drag his feet when he thought he was sneaking out. He is a decent man at the core, always has been, but he listens too fast to the voice that sounds most certain. That's the knot in his brain. He married Sloane, and I tried to welcome her, I did. Yet from the first afternoon, I could feel her gaze taking quiet inventory of my house, eyes like little tags you peel and stick. Eliza, my granddaughter, is 9 and fearless in all the right ways. She climbs straight into my lap without ceremony, squints at unfairness as if it were a loose screw to be tightened, and draws my workshop with the red door open wide. Those pictures hang above my bench, where my planes rest belly down and the chisels sleep in their felt rolls. She is the part of me that refuses rust. I am not given to sentiment. I label drawers. I sharpen on a schedule. I like my coffee a little burnt and my evenings quiet, 1 pour of whiskey on cold nights, nothing with a legend on the label, just a steady pour a man can trust. I lift my glass to Marion, to the roofs we raised together, to the day's small mercies. Then I set the glass down and get on with living. Until last winter, I believed the worst a family could do to an old man was forget to call or treat him like thin glass. I mismeasured that. There are people who begin counting your things while you are still breathing, and a few who decide to hurry the counting along. When I saw that clearly, I did what I have always done. I measured the problem. I marked my cuts. And I readied myself to finish the job. The first warnings came quietly, like a floorboard beginning to creak. A flutter in my chest when I bent for a dropped screw. A moment where the room seemed a half step away, as though the ground beneath my boots no longer trusted me. I told myself it was nothing. At 72, a man learns to ignore half his aches. But when it happened 3 times in a week, I set down my saw mid-cut and thought of Marion. She used to scold me for tuning out what my body whispered. You cannot build forever, Ned, she'd say, pressing a glass of water into my hand. Even timber has a breaking point if you do not listen. So I listened. The hospital was all bleach and plastic, machines blinking like gossipers who didn't know when to hold their tongues. They called it observation. To me, it felt like being shelved, like a book set aside to gather dust until someone decided whether to keep it or discard it. Daniel arrived that evening with a balloon and a box of cookies, gripping them too tightly, as if props could prove devotion. Sloane touched my arm with a gentleness that felt rehearsed, a softness for the audience rather than for me. We were so worried, she said, her eyes fixed not on me, but on the monitor. I studied her expression. Worried? No, calculating. A woman measuring whether the stage lights were aligned. Daniel cleared his throat, awkward, boyish. Eliza made you a card, Dad. Drew your workshop, the red door, the workbench, every detail. That softened me. I asked him to set it by the window, where it could stand guard when the lights dimmed. For a few minutes, with that card shining like a beacon, I let myself believe this was only family worry, clumsy but honest. Then Sloane spoke again, smooth as a script. The doctor said the arrhythmia finally showed on your EKG. That's significant at your age. I blinked. The doctor had not spoken to me yet. How did she already know? I tucked the question away like a bent nail in a pocket, something to examine later. At my age, you learn not to chase every shadow. But some shadows deserve following. When they left, Daniel leaned down to kiss my forehead. He had not done that in decades. It should have comforted me. Instead, it made me ache with doubt. At what point had concern begun to sound so much like preparation? The next morning, the doctor himself appeared, young, eager, tapping his pen against his clipboard as though rhythm might steady his diagnosis. Mr. Calder, your tests show arrhythmia, yes, but nothing life-threatening. You're stable. We'll adjust your medication and schedule follow-ups. Stable. The word should have settled me. But then he added, offhand, as I explained yesterday to your son and daughter-in-law, these episodes aren't uncommon. Yesterday. They knew before I did. And Sloane had repeated it back to me like she wore the white coat herself. I nodded, thanked him, because men my age were taught not to bite the hand that thinks it helps. But after he left, I stared at the door long after it closed, wondering what business my family had with news meant first for me. Hospitals have a peculiar silence, filled with footsteps, coughs, televisions, yet beneath it all a hush that presses thought upon you. I thought of Daniel, once a boy hammering nails crooked beside me, his heart big enough to sit up all night while Marion labored in the next room. Where was that boy? Did he still live inside the man who now looked sideways at Sloane before speaking? And Sloane, always tidying, always narrating the story as though no one else could edit it. I had dismissed my unease as generational difference. But when she spoke about my heart as though she owned it, something inside me tightened. I turned to Eliza's card on the sill. She had drawn my workshop with the red door wide open, and even added a wreath though it wasn't Christmas. She sees it as mine, still mine. And I realized then, a man can be stripped of dignity not with force, but with the quiet confidence of those already planning his absence. The next day the nurse told me I'd be discharged after lunch. Relief warmed me, like being handed back my tools after too long on loan. Maybe I had been unfair, I thought. Families worry clumsily. Maybe Sloane's briskness was care in disguise. Maybe Daniel's clumsy kiss was proof his heart remembered me after all. I almost convinced myself, until I heard the voices in the hallway. The curtain let in a thin strip of light, and with it my son's hushed tone, tomorrow morning, before he's discharged. She said yes at 8. Sloane's voice followed, sharp as a blade slicing paper. Good. The estate sale team is booked for Saturday. If we wait, we'll lose the spring buyers. My chest tightened. What about the tools? Daniel asked, reluctant, almost pleading. He'll lose his mind if a stranger sells his drill press. Then he should have labeled it, Sloane snapped. Do you want to keep living like this? Waiting for him to die? We can't carry his clutter and his medical drama forever. It's cruel to Eliza. And then, Daniel's voice, smaller, and the bottle. On the sideboard, Sloane answered. He'll drink it as soon as he gets home, sentimental and stupid. He always makes a toast to Marion. Tasteless if done right. The blogs promised. Their footsteps squeaked away on polished tile. I sat very still, my coffee cooling in my hand. The strange thing was, I did not feel rage, not yet. I felt clarity. The puzzle pieces I had ignored fell together, forming a picture no man wants to see. They had already started dismantling my life. And I was the only one left who could stop them. I stood with my hand flat against the cedar chest, the pink sticker glaring like a wound. For a moment, I swore I could hear Marion's voice in the silence, her laugh echoing when she used to fold blankets into it, her hands smelling faintly of lavender soap. That chest had guarded decades of winter nights. Now someone had priced it like junk. Not clutter, I murmured to the empty room. This is the spine of a life. I'd rung Walt, my neighbor since '78, on the drive. He arrived with a flashlight and that old job site quiet, and stood at my shoulder without a single useless question. Walt shifted beside me, flashlight beam shaking on the sticker. They've already landed, Ned. Not circling. Landed. He was right. The vultures had touched down. But I was not carcass yet. On the drive home I called Ms. Talbot. By dusk a bonded courier met me at the red door, photographed and sealed the bottle and the sideboard swabs, and left with them on a signed chain of custody. That night, sleep refused me. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a footstep, every sigh of the wind against the shutters like a thief testing the locks. I rose before dawn, slid Eliza's drawing into the pocket of my coat like armor, and drove through the cold night air to the small grocery that stayed open late. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, washing the aisles pale. I moved steady, deliberate. A box of the darkest black tea. A fresh bottle of whiskey, label crisp and cork untouched. Nothing more. The cashier rang me up without a glance, and I carried the bag out like it was dynamite. Back home, the kitchen waited, quiet, ordinary, smelling faintly of varnish and coffee grounds. I set the kettle to boil. Steam curled toward the ceiling like smoke signals. I poured the boiling water over the tea leaves and watched the liquid deepen, dark as oak bark, bitter as memory. It looked so convincingly like whiskey that even I had to squint to remind myself. Why tea? Because poison was their theater. I needed a counter-performance. Tea would let me pour shame into their glasses instead of death, and let the room itself bear witness. I rinsed the new bottle until the glass squeaked. With a funnel, I filled it with the cooled tea, each pour slow and careful. The amber liquid caught the lamplight as though it knew it was about to be called on stage. I pressed the cork in snug, smoothed the shrink band down until it looked factory perfect. From the outside, I would see the difference. Inside, it was truth masquerading as whiskey. I left the bottle on the counter. In the quiet, it looked ordinary. But I knew better. This was no longer a bottle. It was a mirror, and when the time came, it would show Daniel and Sloane who they really were. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains in long pale stripes. My eyes burned from only an hour of rest, but my hands were steady. Some jobs you do tired because waiting only gives fear more room. By mid-morning, Miss Talbot called. Her voice was crisp, each word balanced like a level on wood. Courier confirmed chain of custody. Lab already has your samples. Preliminary report in 24 hours. Detective Cole will be in the room, plain clothes. You will not be alone, Ned. Her steadiness was the brace I needed. 24 hours. Just in time. Around noon, Walt stopped by carrying a dusty box of nails he claimed I'd left in his shed 20 years ago. He squinted at the bag by the door. That the stage prop? I nodded. They wanted a bottle to end me. I'll give them one to end the lies. He let out a low whistle. Lord help us. You're about to put on a show. Not a show, I said, slipping Eliza's drawing into my inside pocket, right where Marion's photo used to ride when I was younger. A masquerade. And when the masks fall, they'll see themselves for the first time. The day stretched long. The house too quiet, every tick of the clock dragging. I pressed my suit, a little older than I'd like but still neat, and polished the shoes Marion once teased me for saving only for funerals. Tonight, they would serve another purpose. By late afternoon, the house glowed with the last orange of winter sun. The red door waited like a sentinel, paint polished bright, as if Marion had known it would one day guard me in a trial. I set the bottle in its bag by the door and touched the wood. She used to brush her hand over that door before we went out, a ritual promise that we would come back through it together. My hand lingered there now. Walk with me, I whispered. Then I turned the key. Outside, the evening air bit sharp on my cheeks. The road stretched ahead, and somewhere beyond it, a table had already been set, silver polished, chandelier burning, smiles rehearsed. The Mercer house, Sloane's parents' place, shone like a showroom, each bulb strung across the eaves blazing too bright, a rented wreath on the front door, the kind of performance meant to reassure neighbors. Look at us, nothing to hide. Walt had always said it looked more like a department store window than a home. I parked 2 houses down and carried the bag the rest of the way. Laughter drifted from the porch, loud, practiced, like actors warming up. Inside, coats piled high, perfume thick as syrup, chatter filling every corner. Neighbors, cousins, acquaintances, not family drawn together, but witnesses gathered for spectacle. All the better. The more eyes, the truer the show. Sloane's mother spotted me first, sweeping over with arms spread wide, smile so broad it nearly cracked. Her eyes, though, darted to the bag in my hand, then flicked back up like a thief pretending innocence. Edmund. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, I said evenly. She guided me toward the dining room. Chandeliers spilled gold across the linen, silverware lined like soldiers. At the far end, Daniel and Sloane laughed with their sweatered friends, laughter that faltered the instant they saw me, then picked up again, brittle, like porcelain about to crack. I studied the room as a builder studies a foundation. And then I saw him, a plain man, alone, jacket too simple for the company, sipping water. Detective Cole. He didn't nod, didn't break cover, just blended into the wallpaper like silence itself. Perfect. I placed the bag gently on the sideboard. A few guests asked if it was a gift. I smiled. Of a sort. Sloane crossed the room with Daniel in tow, her smile too smooth, eyes locked on the bag. We weren't sure you'd make it, she said. I gave my word, I answered. And I keep my word. Around us, chatter swelled, children's shoes scuffed across the floor, plates clinked. It looked like nothing more than a feast. But I knew better. And so did the bottle waiting on the sideboard. Dinner was about to begin. And with it, the masquerade. The long table stretched like a stage, linen bright as bone beneath a chandelier that hummed with heat. Silverware lay in precise ranks, glass rims flashed with careful polish. The room smelled of roast beef and rosemary, the buttered green beans sending up a sweetness that didn't belong to any honest appetite. I took the chair they offered at the center, close enough to the head to be seen, far enough to be underestimated. Daniel sat across from me, smile taut as a tourniquet. Sloane took her place beside him, one hand resting on his sleeve, the other anchoring a napkin that didn't need anchoring. At the far end, a cluster of their friends performed laughter that sounded like crystal about to crack. Near the corner, Eliza swung her legs and, spotting me, offered the smallest wave, quick, brave. I pressed my palm to my chest once in answer. Against the wall, I found him, the plain man with the unbeautiful tie. Detective Cole. He sipped water, posture unremarkable, like a patch of quiet on an overtalked night. He did not look at me. Good. A spoon tapped a glass. Mr. Mercer rose, practiced geniality smoothing his face. Friends, family, we're grateful, his voice filled the chandelier's circle of light. He gestured toward me with borrowed warmth. Especially to have Edmund with us tonight. Polite applause scattered across the table. I nodded once. The applause ended too quickly, the way applause does when it is relief masquerading as welcome. Daniel stood next, glass in hand, intent showing at the hinge of his jaw. Before we eat, a toast, to health, to family. The word strained like a rope under load. Traditions should be honored. The room's eyes turned, as if on a stage cue, to the sideboard behind me. The bag was gone. In its place, the bottle stood bare as a confession, glass catching the light, amber promise waiting. Someone, Sloane, likely, had unwrapped it during the drift of conversation. It rested where ritual rests, a prop in the open. I rose slowly, letting the old suit move the way a suit should move, like a man is inside it. If we're to toast, I said, then let us do it properly. I took the bottle in both hands. Close, the glass felt cool, the cork gave a soft, obliging sigh. The sound drew the room inward. Across from me, Daniel's fingers flexed against the cloth. Sloane's smile did not shift, but the skin around her eyes tightened as if the light had found her unprepared. I poured. The amber liquid caught the chandelier's gold and held it, pooling into each glass with a steady hush. Around the table, chatter thinned into a hush of watchers. I moved clockwise, measured as a man marking a line before a cut. I did not hurry. I let them lean forward, let them breathe in imitation. The bottle made its way past elbows and crystal, past watch faces and wedding rings, past the soft murmur of people convincing themselves nothing could be wrong at a table so well set. When I reached Detective Cole, he lifted his glass by the stem, gave me the polite smile you offer a stranger, and set it down untouched. At last, I returned the bottle to the sideboard. It stood upright, patient, like a witness that knows it will be asked to speak. To Marion, I said, raising my glass, my voice clear. To the house that still stands. To the child who draws its door open. To truth. Glasses lifted. Chairs creaked. Sloane did not move. Daniel lifted his half an inch, then stopped. Around them, the first neighbor drank. Then another. The room made the easy sound of ritual fulfilled, sips, small noises, the soft exhale of relief that accompanies a thing done in the usual way. I watched only two faces. The color ran out of Daniel's like water from a cut pipe. Sloane's smile held but became a mask made of chalk. She glanced toward her parents, then toward the bottle, then toward the door, measuring exits, not meaning. "Go on," I said to them both, my tone gentle enough to pass for invitation. "Drink." Chairs shifted. A nervous laugh snagged and died halfway down the table. Someone complimented the whiskey. "Smooth," they said, "oak on the nose." I let the compliment pass me, like rain on good shingles. Daniel's knuckles whitened around the stem, Sloane's glass trembled without moving. I held the quiet until it had weight. Then I smiled and set my own glass down. "Do you know what you just tasted?" I asked the room. "Not whiskey. Tea. Strong black tea. The color is right if you know how to brew it. It fools the light beautifully, don't you think?" A ripple moved through the guests, bewilderment first, then a low tide of discomfort. People looked at their glasses as if betrayed by an object. I let that settle, then looked at the bottle. "The original," I said, and the word felt heavy in my mouth, "the one waiting for me at home. The one you expected me to raise to my wife when I returned from the hospital." Daniel swallowed hard. Sloane's eyes flicked from me to the bottle to her mother, whose expression had curdled into something sour. "The original is not here," I finished. "It is in a lab. Swabbed. Sealed. Tested. The chain of custody is complete." My phone buzzed in my pocket, once, even, the way a level settles perfectly between two lines. I did not look immediately. I let the room breathe until it wanted air too badly. Then I drew the phone, read the message, and lifted my gaze. "Confirmed," I said, and the word rang like a struck nail. The bottle was poisoned. The room recoiled. Forks clattered. A glass tipped, casting a thin arc of amber, tea, onto linen. A guest near the end made a small, involuntary sound, the sound people make when the ground they trusted drops a fraction. And then the quiet man with the unbeautiful tie stood and put a badge into the light. "Detective Cole," he said evenly, "County Sheriff's Office." Everyone remained seated. Two uniformed officers stepped through the doorway as if the house had produced them. They did not raise their voices. They did not need to. Their presence made a sound of its own, a settling, as when a heavy beam is set into place and the whole structure adjusts. Cole's voice was clean lumber. "We have chain of custody documentation on a bottle recovered from Mr. Calder's home. We have toxicology confirming adulteration with a harmful agent. We have witness statements regarding conversations at the hospital. We have evidence of prearranged estate liquidation, lot stickers found on property inside Mr. Calder's residence." He turned his gaze down the length of the table without hurrying. It made the light feel honest. "Sloane Mercer," he said gently, as if pronouncing a difficult name for a child, "and Daniel Calder, you will stand." Sloane's chair scraped back an inch, then an inch more. Daniel half rose and sat again, a man whose legs did not know which direction they belonged to. Across the table, Mrs. Mercer pressed her palms flat against the linen as if to keep herself from floating away. Cole's attention shifted like a clock hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, you are to remain seated for questioning. Evidence indicates foreknowledge and complicity in property disposition. We will address those actions at the station." That broke the last of the room's composure. Mrs. Mercer shot to her feet, voice pitched too high. "We did nothing, this is a misunderstanding. We were merely trying to help with." "Please sit," Cole said, and something in his tone arranged her back into the chair. The officers moved with the discretion of experienced men, no unnecessary hands, no spurs in their voices. Metal whispered against Daniel's wrists, a second pair clicked closed around Sloane's. She turned on me then, a small, terrible smile clawing for purchase. "You won't win," she said softly enough that only we heard. "You are alone." I shook my head once. No. I didn't need to say more. The law stood 3 feet to my left. MS. Talbot's text still glowed on my phone, certified report attached, filings queued. And down the table, my granddaughter's eyes had found mine again, wide and steady as if she'd been watching a magic trick and had just learned how it was done. As the officers guided Sloane and Daniel toward the doorway, chairs scraped back, someone sobbed, another person muttered something about calling a lawyer as if the word lawyer could unwind a screw turned this tight. Mr. Mercer's face sagged into the look of a man doing math he never thought he'd have to do. The bottle waited on the sideboard, innocent and theatrical. I picked it up, heavy in the hand, cool on the skin. The glass held every reflection, the chandelier's garland of light, the seam in the wallpaper, the worn place on my knuckle where a chisel had bit me 40 years ago making a cabinet Marion had loved. I set the bottle down carefully and lifted my glass again, the tea now as truthful as anything on that table. To Marion, I said, not loudly, but the words carried. To Eliza. To Truth. No one moved to join me. It didn't matter. The toast wasn't for them. Cole paused at the threshold and looked back to give a small nod, not the kind of nod that congratulates, but the kind that recognizes a beam set straight. Then they were gone, and the house seemed to exhale, the chandelier ticking as its heat adjusted to the new air. At the far end of the table, Eliza's hand lifted, small and certain. I answered with the briefest of smiles. Around us, guests began to find their coats, to murmur explanations to one another, to put a hand on a shoulder as if that might anchor them to something solid. The sideboard stood empty now, the spot where the bottle had been shining like a place saved for a picture yet to be hung. I let my fingertips rest on the linen a moment, feeling the fine weave under my skin, the way a carpenter feels grain to know which way the cut wants to go. The room would forget the words spoken tonight. People forget words. But houses remember. Wood remembers the weight of a hand. Glass remembers the last thing it reflected. And somewhere behind a red door a few miles away, a cedar chest was waiting, unnumbered again, ready to hold what it was always meant to hold, a family's winters, not an auctioneer's list. I drained the last sip of tea. It tasted exactly like what it was, clear, bitter, honest. By the time I reached home, the night had thinned to a hush. The red door stood in the porch light, steady as a lighthouse. I set my palm against the paint and felt the day's noise fall off my shoulders. Marion used to touch this door before we left for dinners, a little promise that we'd come back through it together. I touched it now and said, we came back. Inside, the house smelled of varnish and old cedar. The stickers still clung where Sloane had pressed them, green on the china cabinet, pink on the cedar chest, blue on the frame of the lake painting where Daniel once learned to float. Earlier, proving the crime had felt like victory, here, it felt like a verdict spoken in paper and glue. I hung my jacket, slid Eliza's drawing back onto the wall above the workbench, and sat on the stool. The tools waited in their drawers like old friends who know when not to speak. I ran a hand over the bench top, remembering Daniel's birdhouse, nails set crooked, each mistake a triumph. I could see his small hands, his serious face. A father's mind does not forget those versions of his child, not even while the cuffs are closing on the man. Ms. Talbot texted, filings received, orders in motion, sleep if you can. Detective Cole's name lit my phone once, then disappeared, a courtesy I didn't have words for. I set the phone face down and let the quiet fill in. They hadn't only tried to kill me. They had tried to price out my life, to turn a family's winters into Lot 19. I pictured Marion's hands polishing the cedar chest, the lavender soap she favored, the quilts folded like soft answers to hard weather. It hurt in a clean way, hurt that reminds a man he is still alive. Morning found me standing in that same quiet. Walt knocked twice and let himself in with a thermos and a look I've known since we were young, the look men use when they cannot fix the brake but can hold the beam steady while you do. We started with the stickers. Green first. It peeled from the china cabinet with a long, papery sigh. The glass carried a ghost of adhesive I rubbed away with oil and patience until it shone. We moved room to room, two old men taking labels off a life. Blue came next. Then the yellow on the hall mirror, the pink on the cedar chest saved for last. Walt held the edge for me as I lifted it slow, the sound very small, like an apology you almost miss if you are not listening. I kept that last sticker for a breath, its glue tacky against my thumb, then pressed it flat inside the back cover of my notebook. Not as a wound. As a reminder of how close we came. By afternoon, the house had new surfaces. The same pieces stood where they had always stood, but without numbers, they remembered themselves. I brewed tea, black, strong as last night's courage, and carried the cup to the threshold. The red door looked back like a companion, its color undiminished. Houses hold their people, I believe that. This one had held me through worse and would hold me through what was next. News came the way news comes, brisk calls, scheduled meetings, words like arraignment and counsel and evidence. I said yes and understood. Between calls, I found my hand resting on the phone, as if touch could steady the ache. It did not. Nothing smooths the grain where a sun has bitten into it. You plane it true, you sand, you oil, and still the mark remains. A father grieves that and still stands. 3 days later, the house sounded different. Not the brittle quiet of suspicion, a gentler kind. The furnace hummed, somewhere a floorboard settled, a pencil scratched across paper. Eliza lay on the rug in her socks, a fan of colored pencils around her like rays. Her tongue caught between her teeth the way Marion's used to when she concentrated. She didn't ask to come, she simply belonged here the way breath belongs in the chest. "Grandpa," she said without looking up, "do you think the door should be redder? Or is this the right red?" I sat in my chair and considered the drawing as if it were a plan set on sawhorses. She had drawn the house square and sturdy, and right in the center the door, brighter than anything else, a little taller than in life, as if it had grown to meet us. "It's exactly right," I said. She nodded and added a thin line of shadow under the porch rail, a small true thing only she would notice. We didn't speak about dinners or detectives or why her parents hadn't called. Children know when talk would only bruise. Instead, she showed me the window boxes and the cedar tree and the way the light falls across the doormat, like a blanket, she said, pleased with the simile and the neatness of it. When she finished, she held the paper up to me. "The door looks like it's smiling," she said. "It does," I answered, and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. We taped her drawing above the workbench with 2 neat pieces of blue painter's tape. It hung where my eye falls when I reach for a chisel. The cedar chest sat unnumbered in the next room, quietly itself again. The phone lay still. The law would move where it moved, grief would take its own route in time. I could not lay a straightedge on either. But I could touch the red door in the morning and know I was home. Eliza curled into my side on the chair, warm and solid. Outside, late winter rattled the shutters. Inside, the house held firm. I made tea for us both, strong but sweetened for her. We drank it without toasting, because some victories deserve quiet. When I walked her to the red door and zipped her coat, she asked if she could leave the colored pencils at my house, for next time. I told her yes. She stood on tiptoe to press her palm against the door the way Marion always had, and I did not correct her. There are rituals worth inheriting. After she left, I returned to the workshop and ran a hand over the workbench. The old wood warmed under my palm. In the window's reflection, the door's red was steady, unafraid. They had meant to end me with a bottle and sell my life by lot numbers. I am still here. The house is still ours. And the door is still red. For now, that is enough.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.